Hello YouTube and fellow DC comic fans, I'm Keith One Shot, and this is my Comic Complete dramatic reading series, and today we will be covering Batman in the Shadow, Part 3, all art, text, characters, and storylines belong to DC Comics and Dynamite, not me. If you enjoy these stories, feel free to go out and support DC Comics in your local comic book shop. We start the story off in Gotham City on the East End, where we see Joker with a smile on his face and a knife in his hand. Then the Joker says to the Stag, "I see your point. You're new to the city, and want to explore what the town has to offer. You want to open up Gotham's best and see what's inside. Hint, it's pink. You want some locally sourced mayhem, and in return, I get a trip to Shambhala. Well, let me tell you, I'd kill to get to that promised land, so what's my end of the deal?" We then go to the Gotham Harbor, where Batman has the Shadow locked up. Batman then says to the Shadow, "The Stag! Explain!" Then the Shadow answers by saying, "I was once like him, a servant only to my own dark whims, but I was made to change. I refuted his philosophy of pure self-interest, of evil. I became the Shadow, and for that, the Stag loathes me most of all." Batman then says to the Shadow, "I know the feeling. Why Gotham?" Then the Shadow tells Batman he descended from the first murderer. He believes his sole right is to prey on whomever he chooses. Where I punish society's worst, he punishes its best. His each and every ritual murder brings the Stag closer to Shambhala, the same power that created me. After decades, he only needs one more good heart to open the door. You cannot stop him alone." Batman then tells the Shadow, "You don't get a pass because you didn't kill Lamont Cranston. I'll stop the Stag, then I'll deal with you. We're at the bottom of Gotham's harbor. Millions of gallons of water hang over your head. Behave while I'm gone." Then Batman leaves the Shadow there, shackled and chained. The Shadow has an angry look on his face after being left there by Batman. Then the Shadow says, "You, step out." We then hear a voice reply, "I will, but only because I choose to. You're not in control." The Shadow then replies, "I have been in control since before you were born, Alfred Pennyworth." We then see Alfred step out and tell the Shadow, "All well and good, but only two people can escape those chains. One is a god, and the other is Batman." Then the Shadow replies to Alfred by saying, "And who do you think taught him?" Alfred then says with confidence, "Yes, well, you would say that. Master Bruce may not understand you. He may not accept that there are dark things in this world that simply cannot be explained, but I do." We then see a memory of Alfred in his younger days. Alfred then goes on to narrate, "This wasn't always my uniform. I was working for the MIG long before I met Thomas Wayne. We tracked a fugitive to Canada's northwest. He was held up tight, but we found him. Found him dead by his own hand. Something was there with us, in that place. Something in the walls." The cave that Alfred and his men are in is lined with the bones of countless victims. Truly a dark place indeed. Alfred then goes on to further narrate, "Horror, true evil, potent, primal, unending scar tissue on a better world. My men turned on each other, tore at themselves. I closed my eyes to not be struck mad, and I ran. In every battle since, in my years at Master Bruce's side, I have never seen pitch as dark as in that place until I looked into your eyes today." Alfred then has a very serious look on his face as he says to the Shadow, "I never told Batman. I never spoke of it to anyone. So now, you're going to speak to me." Meanwhile, back on the East End of Gotham City, we see the Joker carrying on his conversation with the Stag from before, as the Joker says, "I get it. Your Shadow's working with bat ears, and you want someone to stab with, but why should I trust you?" Then the Stag says with a blank look in his eyes, "I am an honest signal." To which the Joker replies, "That's some science right there. Didn't expect that from someone so pre-Cambrian. I like it. Means you're like me. Exactly what you look like. Toxic, deadly, and you don't hide it." The Stag then reaches out his hand to give the Joker something, and the Joker says, "What you got there? Hold on, I didn't know there'd be reading." And it seems the Stag has given the Joker a picture that depicts the origin of who the Stag descends from. Then the Joker says to the Stag, "I find myself newly stimulated. Kane, can't pick your family. I guess a bit traditional for me. I pride myself on innovation. But I know an apex predator when I see one. A lion doesn't pass judgment on a gazelle. Cancer doesn't pass judgment on a brain. I've been saying this all along. Evil doesn't exist. There's only actions. We got to the same place, the top of the food chain, just on a different path. Mine was more fun." We then see the Joker stab the drawing that the Stag gave him. Then the Joker says, "But horny, I think we're going to get along just fine." Meanwhile, back at Gotham Harbor, where Batman has the Shadow chained up, with Alfred watching him, Alfred says to the Shadow, "You attacked Master Bruce in Lamont Cranston's apartment. Why?" The Shadow then tells Alfred, "No one commands the Shadow." To which Alfred replies, "Someone does. I might be old, but you're a stationary target, and I've got a pistol." We then see the Shadow roll his eyes to the back of his head, then say to Alfred, "Do you?" We then see the gun phase out of Alfred's hand. Then Alfred says, "What, it?" It was in my hand, the Shadow then tells Alfred. The clouded mind is confident, Pennyworth. As for my attack, I have never stopped training Bruce. Some lessons can only be learned in hindsight, and contemplation of the Shadow is Bruce Wayne's most important lesson. Alfred then points at the Shadow and says with a serious look on his face, I've known Master Bruce his entire life, and maybe so have you. If you have, then you know you can't force him to do things, and this thing, you, the Stag, Shambhala, Batman won't stop digging, even if it kills him. Your descendant, Cranston, Barry, O'Neill, the lives already lost fuel him. This is the worst time you could appear with blood on your hands. It will drive him even harder towards the truth, because that is who he is. The Shadow then tells Alfred, some truths are unobtainable. When he accepts that, he will know who I am. But this is not the first time I have appeared. I have visited him many times, in many faces, leaving his mind clouded. This face, but the glint in the peripheral vision of his mind's eye. I have long watched Batman develop, as I watched all my students. Alfred then raises his eyebrow and says, other students? It can't be. The Shadow then tells Alfred, can't it? I've built an army over the decades. We are then shown a few of the people that the Shadow has trained over the years, as the Shadow goes on to say, soldiers that would one day stand with me against an immortal killer my guns alone could not silence. Yet, as each of them were about to complete their training, they were cut down by the Stag. Batman is not my only student, Alfred Pennyworth, but he is the last. Back over at the east end of Gotham, with the Joker and the Stag, we see the Joker with an evil grin on his face as he says to the Stag, I'll give you one word on Batman, anal retentive, or is that two? He's the detail guy, not me, and he's always working. Sleeps in that cow he must. I've sniffed it, and it is unwashed. Small things bother him. Murders of a certain kind, fatherless children, surprise evisceration, and he does notice every little thing. The Joker then slashes the head off of a nearby mannequin and throws his knife into the head of another, as he goes on to say, but he never listens to what you're trying to tell him. You want to string him up? It won't be hard to find him. He's always looking for me. Now that I've come out of my den, it won't be long. I think Batman misses me. Suddenly, we hear a loud crash as we see Batman come through the ceiling window of the building. The Stag looks up, and the Joker just smiles as he says, I know I would. Batman then knocks the Joker to the ground, landing on him as Batman yells, Stag! Joker! The Joker then gets up and raises his knife, ready to strike, as he says, sure, the new kid's always exciting, but my name should always come first. Then the Joker slashes his knife at Batman with a fury, but Batman dodges the Joker's attempts. Then out of nowhere, the Stag jumps towards Batman and cuts him as he knocks Batman to the ground, standing over Batman ready to strike again. Then Batman says while coughing up blood, you think the Joker will help you, Stag? He led me right to you, like you shot up a flare. The Stag then says with a blank stare, I am an honest signal. Batman then in a rage, flips the Stag off of him, then punches and kicks the Stag, as Batman says, I know, and that's helpful. The Stag then grabs Batman's ankle, trying to break it, but it seems Batman was prepared, as he smiles and tells the Stag, reinforced joint. Unlike the Shadow, I learn. Remember this? Then Batman shows the Stag his knife, now in Batman's hands. The Stag's eyes go wide. Then Batman cracks the Stag in the face with a spin kick, then slams him against a wall as Batman, with blood leaking from his mouth, says to the Stag, how? How'd you do it? I saw you die. No one could survive a wound like that. A fall from that height. The Shadow believes you're immortal. I want the truth. Tell me how you walked away from that gunshot, or you won't be walking at all. The Stag's eyes now go pitch black as the Stag says to Batman, I am an honest signal. Then Batman grits his teeth and says, so am I! But it seems Batman didn't see the Joker lurking behind him, with wire ready to choke and strangle Batman. And then Joker does just that, as Batman is grasping for air, kicking and struggling. The Joker says, maybe you've been right, you know, partners, so useful. All those times when I was bashing in their brains while you snuck up from behind. Then Joker tightens the wire around Batman's neck as he says, I can learn too, see? We then return to the Gotham Harbor, where Alfred's face grows more and more concerned, as Alfred says to the Shadow, stay where you are! The Shadow then replies, no, it's time I took my leave. Alfred now appears afraid, as he says, what? You can't! You can't! Then the Shadow says, you now know what you must. I have been here exactly as long as I needed. We then see the chains around the Shadow, as well as the Shadow's cloak begin to raise, as the Shadow's eyes are now blood red. The Shadow then says, there are only so many good people in Gotham. You are not one of them. Neither am I. I told Bruce from the start. It is why I guided him through every face that made him who he is. It wasn't just to defeat the Stag. It was to protect him. Bruce was in danger from the moment he chose to become a bat, to give up a human life, to protect others, to be one of Gotham's best. Bruce Wayne is the Stag's final victim. We then see Batman awake, as he's been tied and hung up. The first thing Batman sees is Joker and the Stag. The Joker smiles and says, exciting! I wasn't sure you'd wake up this time. You'll love what comes next. Then we see that Batman is tied up and surrounded by a gauntlet of his villains in what looks to be a ritual sacrifice. Meanwhile, back at Gotham Harbor, we hear Alfred say, "No!" as the chains that bond the Shadow break, freeing the Shadow, as he says, "Yes, Alfred Pennyworth, but the stag does not come for Batman, simply because he is good." We then see the Shadow now has his guns drawn, as he says to Alfred, "He comes because Batman is destined to become the next Shadow." And that ends this story of Batman and the Shadow, Part 3. Comic published by DC Comics and Dynamite. All rights, story art, and characters belong to DC Comics and Dynamite and their respective owners, not me. This has been Batman and the Shadow, Part 3, and I'm your host, Keith One Shot. If you like this video, make sure to support DC Comics, pick up a copy of the trades and single issue comics, support your local comic book shop, take care, and have a great day. Goodbye.